Hi there. I'm going to talk about escrow agreements, which I think are a pretty interesting topic. Anybody who's done M&A deals should be familiar with this, but it goes broader than that. What are escrow agreements? Basically, they're an arrangement where money on one side and documents on the other side are put into the hands of an independent third party and released when certain defined conditions are met. Sounds really simple, doesn't it? Anyway, give you an example. 2 years ago, we were involved in a big M&A deal, and unfortunately it fell apart. It was a great deal, and it was basically because neither the Chinese nor the Swiss could trust each other to send across their signed agreements before the other one. And very sadly, no one consulted us, otherwise we'd have said, well, do an escrow agreement. We'll be the escrow agent. And I come back later to what sort of people can be escrow agents. I've mentioned M&A. So typically the money is going to be paid for the shares being sold. When the shares are sold, all sorts of documents may have to go across, like the board of directors may resign and a new board comes in, the articles of the company may change, intellectual property agreements may be put in place, share options. VC it's slightly different because there's an investment in shares rather than a purchase of shares. But basically, the share subscription, share issue documents are on the one side and the money's on the other side. It might be more probable to get share options actually as one of the documents on VC deals rather than M&A deals. Warranties. So on an M&A deal, typically the buyer will have warranties lasting 1 or 2 years typically. Tax warranties sometimes often last longer. And they'll have a retention against warranty claims. So they don't want to pay the retention against warranties to the buyer because they're going to spend it. So they put it in escrow. And when the warranty period comes to an end, then the escrow warranty retentions monies are released. Similar on construction contracts, you get a warranty period or a defects liability period, it's often called, and we've done escrow where it was the retention against the defects liability warranties that was put in escrow. Shareholder disputes. If there's a shareholder resigning because there's a dispute, obviously one of the things that needs to be done is sign the settlement agreement resolving the dispute, but also he might be handing over things like computers, all sorts of things, confidential documents, etc., etc. Software, source code escrow you may have heard of. That's where the licensee, which might be a really big corporation, is worried that the software developer might go bust. So the source code is put into escrow so that if he does go bust, the licensee can get at it and pay another developer to take it over and do the upgrades and updates. And that's well evolved now. There are places like in England, the National Computing Centre acts as escrow agent on these things. Real estate, very common. In residential real estate, for example, the buyer gets his mortgage offer. The bank lending the money doesn't want to release the money until solicitors have confirmed all the documents are in place. And at the same time, the buyer's money then goes to help the seller pay off his mortgage. So there's a whole sort of cascade of stuff that all happens on the closing date, the completion date. Aircraft closings, very common. You'll get the title documents, the bills of sale, certificates of technical acceptance released simultaneously with the purchase price, and there are specific title companies in aircraft deals. It's quite specialised. Lastly, there was a bespoke one we did a few years ago. There was an intellectual property dispute, and part of the settlement was that the infringers had to change the business name and they had a domain name. So we said we want that put in escrow, pending closing, and we devised, after looking carefully at the domain name agreements, a mechanism to do that. It was quite tricky, but we were quite proud of it, because afterwards we were approached by a major escrow company to have a cup of coffee and talk about it. So I'm afraid that article's come down off our website, because obviously we were giving away some quite bespoke know-how. So just bear us in mind if you're doing one of those. Advantages of escrow. Well, the escrow agent should be independent. I mean, unless he's genuinely independent, don't use him or her or it. Who can be an escrow agent? I mentioned this earlier. Can be law firms, can be a bank or a trust company that provides escrow services. There's normally a separate escrow account. It's a type of trust account, really, for the escrow monies. And just a word here, if you're dealing with European law firms in civil law jurisdictions, from my experience, I don't believe they are often required to have a separate trust account, whereas English and Hong Kong lawyers certainly, and Australian lawyers, have to have a separate trust account. So that's that. The fees are normally shared by the parties to the transaction. And lastly, what can go wrong? Well, a dispute breaks out, typically on warranty retention agreements, and then the escrow agreement will provide that the money is blocked unless one, the parties resolve the dispute, say they sign joint instructions to release the money, or two, there's a court order ordering the escrow agent to release the money, you know, with so much to some persons and so much to other persons. And thirdly, if there's an arbitral award, which is an alternative to a court order. That's it. I tried to keep it short. I think it's pretty interesting, and I hope it was useful.